I don't know about you, but personally, I find a lot of the tips and tricks that I come across for how to stay more motivated or be productive or not procrastinate, they're often a little shallow or unhelpful, sometimes even counterproductive. But over the years, working as a psychologist and a mindset coach for folks, I have found a handful of ideas that are pretty simple but remarkably helpful in terms of building sustainable sources of motivation so that we can stop procrastinating and follow through on our most meaningful work. Hi, my name is Nick Wignall. In the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through 4 of my favorite tips for building sustainable motivation for any project or task, personal, professional, or creative. Number 1, celebration rituals. Positive reinforcement is one of the most powerful forces in all of human psychology, and it's remarkably simple. Basically, the way it works is, if a behavior is immediately followed by a reward, that behavior tends to increase and be repeated in the future. It could be a mouse tapping a little button in a cage because you gave it a food pellet for tapping the button. It could be a kid who starts picking up her clothes more frequently because they got some praise and reward for doing it on their own the day before. Or it could be an adult showing up at the gym for the second day in a row on January 2nd because the staff at the front office desk were especially friendly and welcoming the previous day when they came in. Now, I think we all basically know this idea of positive reinforcement pretty intuitively, but it's amazing how often we forget to implement it ourselves. Think about it. Of all the tasks you've accomplished in the last, let's say, 48 hours, how many of them did you remember to positively reinforce yourself for afterwards? 0? Maybe 1 accidentally? Now, I'm not saying we should go around giving ourselves treats every time we answer an email or, check something off our to-do list. But if there is a particular task or project that you find it especially hard to either get or stay motivated for, a little positive reinforcement might be surprisingly helpful. And a great way to do this is to create a little celebration ritual, which is just a brief action you take that's enjoyable immediately after you accomplish or achieve something. For example, let's say you want to feel more motivated consistently to work out each day after work. Well, after each workout, you might celebrate by hopping on a bike to kind of cool down for 20 minutes and watching your favorite guilty pleasure TV show that you don't normally let yourself watch. That would be a little celebration of getting a workout done that would reinforce your behavior of working out again and make it more likely that you would feel motivated to do it in the future. Or let's say you wanted to get more motivated to get back into your old passion project of drawing and illustrating. Let's say you're an artist and you really like to do illustrations, but you've fallen out of the habit of doing it and you're having a hard time getting motivated to get back into it. Well, what you might do is make it a point to create a little celebration ritual where every time you do a little illustration, even just a tiny one, you text a photo of it to a good friend and say, hey, check it out. Because you're likely to get some positive words of encouragement from a friend. And you've got lots of friends, so you don't have to bug one particular friend every single time you do a drawing, but you'll get a little bit of reward or encouragement, which will over time increase your overall motivation for doing this activity. It's a simple and it can seem like almost a silly thing to do, celebrating our successes, but it's one of the biggest pieces of low-hanging fruit when it comes to creating sustainable amounts of motivation in our lives. Number 2, self-boundaries. Now, typically, when you hear the term boundaries, you think of other people setting and enforcing good boundaries on other people. But the ability to set and enforce good boundaries with ourselves is at least as important, especially when it comes to getting and staying motivated to do important work. Here's how I think about it. Everything you say yes to requires at least a little bit of energy and motivation to get started on and to see through. And if you said yes to literally every single request anyone made of you, and every new idea that popped into your head for something new you should do, you'd spend all of your energy on tons of different things, but you wouldn't make much progress because you only got a little bit of energy for each one of those. You're essentially spreading yourself really, really thin, so you don't make a whole lot of progress on any one thing. Instead, if you're willing to say no more often, either to other people's requests of you or to your own fun ideas, you're much more likely to have a significant amount of motivation for the handful of things that really matter to you. A little phrase I heard that captures this really well is the idea of less but better. Of course, new things, new activities, new ideas, they're fun and they're exciting. And saying no to them, frankly, feels like kind of a bummer, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis. This is why we so often fail to set boundaries, good boundaries we know we should set with ourselves. So here's a little trick I found to get better at saying no to ourselves so that we can say yes to the most important things. And it's called keeping a later file. A later file is simply a note in your notes app on your phone where you stash any kind of interesting, exciting, or fun idea that pops into your head. The beauty of the later file is that it gives you permission to temporarily say no to most of the ideas that pop into your head and thereby kind of maintain motivation for the few things you really need that motivation for, because it gives your brain permission to let them go, because it knows you're storing them in a place and you will remember them and you can get back to them if you want to later on. In short, if you want to have more sustainable motivation to do the few things that really matter most to you, you have to be willing to say no, at least temporarily, to most things. And it's a lot easier to do that if you can reframe those no's as laters by using a later file. Number 3, environmental design. If you ask most people whether their environment impacted their energy levels and motivation, you'd get a resounding yes from just about everybody. But ironically, if you ask those same people whether they consciously design their environments to be conducive to working optimally, you'd get a lot of awkward silences and maybe the occasional half-hearted mumble yes. So like positive reinforcement, environmental design is really important. And we know it, especially when it comes to motivation, but we rarely do much about it. So a good place to start is simply to reflect on the following question when it comes to environmental design. What are some easy ways to make my environment more motivating or more energizing to work in? To get you started, I'll give you a few examples from former clients of mine with whom I've kind of gone through this exercise. I remember one, this guy said, I can't believe something so simple and stupid actually worked, but it was profound. And what he did was, especially in the winter, he lived in a pretty cold place that got really cold in the winter. He said he would set his thermostat to automatically turn up the heat in his home office so that as soon as he got up and got into his office, he could start working right away because it was nice and warm and pleasant and cozy in his office, as opposed to how it normally was, which is he would get into his office, he'd be freezing, he'd turn up the thermostat, but it'd take half an hour for the temperature to get back up. And that half an hour would be kind of wasted time where he was kind of fiddling around because he was too uncomfortable to get started with his work. Really simple thing, seems obvious in hindsight, but can make a huge difference. Another one, a really simple one, I remember that this woman had a kind of like an art studio out in a separate building on her property. And she realized that one of the things that was getting in the way of her getting started with her work, she was pretty good once she got started with her work, but she often struggled to get started in the first place and would procrastinate a lot. And one of the reasons she found was that her work environment, while it was full of really helpful things for doing her art projects, it was kind of cold feeling, like emotionally cold feeling. And so what she did was, one Sunday afternoon, she printed out and got frames for like 15 photos of her grandkids and her kids and other family members and fun vacations she'd been on. And she put these photos all over her studio. And it made the whole place seem so much more warm and inviting, and did a tremendous amount for her motivation to just get started with her creative projects. Now, as hopefully these examples have shown, they don't have to be tremendously complex or expensive or even time-consuming. Often one or two just sort of minor shifts to your environment can make a huge difference in your overall energy levels and motivation and your ability to just get started and follow through on important work. Now, before we move on from this tip to the next one, I want to share one of my favorite kind of personal tricks that I use all the time for motivation that has to do with our environment and sort of manipulating our environment a little bit in a thoughtful way. And that is work in stranger places. Whenever I feel kind of low on energy or lacking motivation for a task, something I'll often do is simply get up, grab my laptop, stick it in my bag, and go to some unusual place to work for half an hour or an hour. It could be the coffee shop. It could be the library down the street from my house. It could just be a park bench, if the weather's nice, at the park that's like a block away. But I'm just continually shocked and amazed how much the environment matters on my energy and motivation, and how easily I can kind of rejuvenate my energy and motivation by simply deciding to work in a totally new environment. It's amazing. Definitely give that one a shot. Number 4, energy-based productivity. So if you think about it, how do you tend to approach your to-do list or the things you need to get done for a given day? Are you kind of a take on the biggest, hardest thing first kind of person? Or maybe you're a warm up with lots of little tasks and then get to the big stuff. This is kind of the person who like dips their toes in the pool first before diving in. Or maybe you just literally start at whatever happens to be the top and just work your way down very sequentially. Maybe you don't even have a to-do list and you just sort of wing it when it comes to what you need to do each day. Now, I am definitely not here to pass judgment on anyone's preferred way of getting things done. And there are lots and lots of systems and frameworks and to-do list structures, many of which are very cool and interesting. And so definitely explore those and check those out if you want. But if you are having trouble getting and staying motivated to follow through on some tasks, I've got a suggestion for you when it comes to kind of how you set up or stage your work. And that is, you want to use energy, not difficulty, as an organizing principle for your work. See, your motivation to do something psychologically is actually highly dependent on just your physical energy levels at a given time. Motivation, in a lot of ways, it's much more a question of the fit between the task and your particular energy levels right now. Let me give you an example of this from my own life. If I don't feel motivated to work out today, is it because I'm lazy and self-sabotaging? I don't think so. Probably not. I mean, I could be a little bit lazy sometimes, and everybody falls into a little bit of self-sabotage from time to time, but I don't think that's actually a great explanation. More than likely, it's because I'm trying to work out at a non-optimal time. For me, for instance, the morning is a terrible time for me to work out because I don't have good physical energy. I don't have good physical energy and I don't have good social energy. Like, you don't want to try and chit chat with me for like the first hour or two after I wake up. And similarly, if I try and do anything physical, whether it's going for a run or lifting weights or doing chores or something like that, it's just not good. I'm just kind of grumpy and it just feels non-optimal. However, if you ask me to work out or do something physical in the mid-afternoon, like say around noon or even till like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, great. I am all about it. I'm also pretty good at socializing in the afternoon, but I am not very good at creative work in the afternoon. I am good, however, at creative work in the morning. Even though physically and socially I'm kind of down here, my creative energy is really high in the morning. The point of all this is that it's not that I am, good or bad at doing creative work or working out or socializing, or that I'm lazy or self-sabotaging or any of that kind of stuff. 99% of the time, when I have trouble getting and staying motivated for a task, it's because there's some kind of a mismatch between the task and my particular energy levels. So, as much as possible, and I realize you can't completely control all of this, but you probably have more control over it than you think right now, try to align your work with your optimal energy levels. To make this practical, when you're looking at your to-do list, try to organize it not by size or difficulty or even by time necessarily, and instead think about it in terms of your energy levels. So for me, I have really good creative energy in the morning, so I tend to schedule my writing projects first thing in the morning or very quickly after I wake up. Because I know it's not a good time to do much else, but it is a really good time to do creative stuff. And I'm going to lose most of that creative energy by the time midday rolls around. Now, you can obviously try and do this with your entire to-do list or all the things you have to get done, but you can also just use it simply as a reflection question for one particular kind of task or project that you seem to really struggle consistently with in terms of having enough motivation. So you can ask yourself this question: given the nature of this task, when would I have the best energy to do it? It's a simple question, but it often yields very surprising results. Okay, before we wrap up, I actually have one bonus tip for you. And that is, I want you to think about harnessing the power of personal values. Now, I don't have time to get into a whole thing about values. It's a huge topic, really complex, super interesting, but I don't have time to get into it here. But I will just say, it's worth mentioning because if you really get good at this, this is potentially the most powerful source of motivation just in general. Now, personal values are ideals or principles that guide and motivate our choices and our behavior, especially when things are difficult. And of course, we all have values, but if you think about it, and we're kind of honest with yourself, most of us have pretty vague, unclear values. We don't really spend a whole lot of time reflecting on them or thinking consciously about them. Unfortunately, this means they tend to not exert much influence on our motivation. On the other hand, when we're really clear about our values, which ones they are, why they matter, and in what circumstances, they tend to be a source of tremendous internal motivation. So if you're interested in getting started with some of this values work and discovering your own personal values so that you can use them to improve your motivation to get things done, I have a free values discovery toolkit. It's just a simple little PDF. I think there's 4 or 5 pages. And what I do is I just give you a few brief, really easy exercises that you can go through to start discovering your own personal values. So if you want to check that out, you can download it for free. I put a link in the description below. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, I have another video that I would recommend if you have a little bit of time. It's called 3 Psychological Reasons Why You Procrastinate. Basically, I try to unpack the psychology behind procrastination so that you can better understand how to deal with it in a healthy and productive way. So you can check that video out right here.